laser-driven light sail. So this is the concept that the Breakthrough Starshot is based around. And then the other one, the other energy source that is dense enough, or energy storage medium that is dense enough to build a rocket around, is antimatter. So there, the biggest problem is how do we make the quantities of antimatter that would be needed. But there's work going on in that area. So before, people used to think it was hundreds of kilograms of antimatter, but now there's been some new developments that think we might be able to do it with much, much less.
Like, how much less? Like, if you wanted to make a journey to Alpha Centauri and actually go into orbit, how much antimatter do you think is realistic?
Okay, so first of all, let's agree we're going to talk about a probe. So we're going to talk about not sending humans. We're going to talk about sending maybe not even a Voyager-class spacecraft. We're going to rely upon miniaturization. So all this thinking now, the Breakthrough Starshot and other concepts I'll talk about, we're all going to bank on miniaturization of spacecraft and using the technology that's gone into our smartphones to make a spacecraft that's maybe tens of kilograms or maybe even just grams. And then to use antimatter, the most promising concept, this is work that's been done by Gerald Jackson, who has a company called HBAR Technologies. And this was work that was funded under the NASA NIAC program that I know you're a big fan of. Most of your listeners know about NIAC. So the idea was to not use the antimatter directly, but rather to use the antimatter as a way to catalyze fission. So to take something like uranium, even just natural uranium-238, and just spritz it with a little bit of antiprotons and get those U-238 atoms to undergo fission, and then direct the fission daughters, the little particles that shoot out at about 3 or 4% the speed of light, to then electromagnetically direct those particles backwards. And that is a kind of a rocket that can get us to probably 10% the speed of light. To get faster than that gets difficult because it's still a rocket, still has to obey the rocket equation. But that could probably do a flyby mission with on the order of kilogram of antimatter. And this particular researcher, Gerald Jackson, knows a bit about this because his day job used to be making antimatter at Fermilab. So he worked at the particle accelerator near Chicago and produced antimatter. And he has some ideas about how we might be able to make an antimatter factory. And it wouldn't be the size of the Large Hadron Collider, but it wouldn't fit into your university lab. It would be a facility on the order of a gymnasium or something. And it would take a lot of power. Just again, going back to energy, it's going to take just a lot of energy. Just work out the kinetic, the 1/2 mv squared, the kinetic energy you need to put into a spacecraft to get it to these speeds. That energy's got to come from somewhere. So that's, I think, quite promising idea. I would probably put that as plan A or plan B on my list. I think that kind of vies right now with the laser-driven light sail, the Breakthrough Starshot architecture is probably being the two most promising contenders for doing an interstellar mission in our century.
I mean, if you went back to just the basic fundamentals, just started from scratch and thought about what would it take to make antimatter, because I don't really think of antimatter as I think of it as almost like a battery. Like, you have to take energy, generate antimatter, contain it, and then use it. As you said, you just spritz your uranium, or you collide it with matter to create gamma radiation or whatever. If you were sort of go down to first principles and sort of stack up the technology, where do you think it would lie in that idea of an antimatter factory? How much are we looking at?
In terms of cost?
Yeah.
I mean, it would be on the order of something like the Large Hadron Collider in terms of cost. So it's not as big an accelerator. It does not need to reach as extreme of energies. It would need to be designed and optimized to produce antimatter. So what Joel Jackson always is careful to say is when CERN or Fermilab had made antimatter in the past, they were making it for fundamental physics experiments, where they were counting the antiprotons that they were making. They weren't trying to maximize the production. So the design and the engineering would be different. But just the energy cost to run that machine would be, comparable to the cost it probably takes to run the Large Hadron Collider. So it's a big buy-in, but I wouldn't rule it out because I think the public would be interested in this. The public seems to support the Large Hadron Collider in order to discover the Higgs boson, which, let's be honest, how many people really can appreciate what the Higgs boson is? It's probably counted in a few hundreds or thousands of people in the world. I'm certainly not. I mean, I'm a big supporter of high energy physics and was very excited by the announcement of it, but it's not my field. I can't really have a deep appreciation for it.
But it does feel like a fundamental technology, though. Like having antimatter production, you can imagine a ton of hopefully peaceful uses. You can imagine weapon uses for it as well. But
that's a concern. There's medical uses probably for it, but it would probably be a single purpose facility to make the antimatter you'd need for the interstellar mission. In fact, maybe you would even want to build it off Earth.
Right.
It might be a good idea just to address those concerns that I can already see, percolating up in your mind and your listeners' mind about what else can be done with antimatter.
They make a pretty nasty bomb.
So, to avoid that, it might be good to do it in space.
Yeah. So I want to talk about this paper that you were a member of fairly recently. Explain the idea, because there's like a lot of moving parts here. So,
right. So the idea is this comes back to this idea of energy. Is no matter what you're going to do, build the giant laser to push the light sail or make antimatter, the amount of energy is pretty staggering that we need for interstellar flight. And there's arguments to be made that maybe we're not going to have enough energy till the 23rd century. There's a calculation you can do and just say, how much energy do we have available now that we spend on things like launches of spacecraft and probes? And then what fraction is that? Of the energy we have available as our civilization? And then you can sort of extrapolate that forward, and maybe we won't have enough available disposable energy till the 23rd century. So maybe Star Trek had the timing right.
Yeah.
So if you're not willing to wait, then it's interesting to think about